Hello, and welcome to the Wine Enthusiast Podcast. You're serving of drinks culture and the people who drive it. I'm Jake Abrams, digital editor and podcast producer here at Wine Enthusiast. This Sunday marks the return of Hollywood's biggest night, the Academy Awards, where stars gather to celebrate the year's best in film. But these days, plenty of those same stars are also competing in a different arena, the spirits industry. Over the past decade, celebrity-backed bottles have become a booming corner of the drinks world, from tequila and Mezcal to vodka and beyond. Some are passion projects, some are savvy business moves, and others fall somewhere in between. And with A-list names launching or attaching themselves to brands, including Oscar nominees like Kate Hudson, who founded King Street Vodka, and Benicio del Toro, who has backed Perro, Verde Mezcal, it raises an interesting question. What ingredients actually make a spirits brand succeed? In this episode, we take a closer look at these ventures with Ed Mundy, who heads up beverages research at investment bank and financial services firm Jefferies. We get into why celebrities enter the spirits business, how these partnerships typically work, and how often star power truly translates into sales. Well, Ed, thank you so much for coming on the Wine Enthusiast podcast. Why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Hi, Jake. So my name's Edward Mundy. I'm a beverages analyst. I'm based in London for US investment bank Jefferies. I've been working in alcohol for the best part of 20 years, most of which has been spent during my time at Jefferies and other banks before that. But I also worked in industry, having sort of grown up in the beer industry 20 odd years ago. So a good combination of both, seeing things from the financial side of things and then seeing things at the coalface, within a brewery.
Do you work with these types of celebrity spirit brands in your day-to-day job?
So my day-to-day job, I spend a big chunk of my time, looking at beer companies, spirits companies, and soft drinks companies. So clearly, we do focus on celebrity brands insofar as when the large companies buy them, we want to track them, see what type of return they're making, see what type of growth they're throwing off. And clearly, as part of our broader job, we keep an eye out on which brands are hot, which brands are not hot, and in particular, what are the next big categories. We don't spend that much time, I would say, directly interfacing, with some of these companies, but, it's clearly something that's on the radar for us all the time.
So in that vein, is there a starting point that you can identify where this sort of took off?
Sure. So, look, I think the first, people have been doing celebrity brands, not just within beverage alcohol, but across, broader goods for decades, right? There've been a number of instances where celebrities have got involved in some of the brands, either for passion reasons, or just as part of something they like to do. But I think the real time that the celebrity brands took off in a big way, in a really big, meaningful way, was when Diageo bought Casamigos, which at the time a lot of commentators thought was a big price, big ticket being paid for it, and I'm sure we'll discuss this a bit later on. But yeah, the Casamigos deal was the first time there's a really big ticket in multiple paid for these types of brands.
Yeah, I think that was close to $1 billion all in. But what about spirits? What makes a spirit so attractive for a celebrity in terms of, why not a celebrity frozen pizza or, which I'm sure there have been. But what about celebrity spirits makes it so attractive?
Well, there's something about alcohol relative to the rest of consumer staples, right? A lot of consumer products that you buy or you use on a daily basis are sort of quite functional, right? You buy chocolate, you buy washing detergent, you buy toilet paper, but spirits is slightly more luxury. It's slightly more discretionary. And, as a result of that, there's a number of reasons that sort of make spirits quite attractive. The first point is that the unit economics of spirits are pretty attractive, very high gross margins, very high profitability. And, when you take a brand that's got real resonance with consumers in the right category at the right time with the right distribution muscle behind it and the right backing, you can really scale, that brand up quite exponentially, frankly. And, if you're one of these big companies that's acquired one of these celebrity brands, it can make a real dent in terms of your top line growth. And ultimately, that's how a lot of these companies are valued on the type of top line growth that they can throw off.
Right. Yeah. Was there a time where spirits like these were seen as more gimmicky and not taken seriously, at least as much as they are now?
Yeah, look, I think if you go back, a couple of decades, there've been a number of examples of the brands that were a bit gimmicky that maybe didn't work, didn't have that degree of authenticity. As you know, Trump Vodka was a very, very good example of that, many moons ago. a brand that was quite blingy, but it didn't really live up to it in terms of the backstory, didn't really look up to it in terms of the taste profile, and those were dropped. But I think what was interesting about Casamigos is that this ticked a lot of boxes, when it came to what made it successful. And I always take a very simplistic view of brands that are successful, whether they are celebrity or not celebrity backed. And ultimately, you need a couple of things. You need a really good backstory, number one. So for Casamigos, it's very authentic. This is the brand, the tequila that's made for you and me, very craft orientated, driving that friendship with your friends and family. You need a really good liquid. In the case of Casamigos, it was a time when people didn't know much about tequila. It wasn't mainstream by any stretch of the imagination. And, this was quite a smooth, easy to drink tequila that was very easy to mix, good vanilla notes with no burn. And, that ticks a lot of boxes, I think, for consumers. And then you need good packaging, you need really attractive packaging. So you need a backstory, you need liquid, you need packaging. On top of that, there was a bit of an urban myth as well around doesn't give you a hangover, which, clearly was not something they ever pushed hard at all.
Right.
And they got their timing, just right. But, I think all successful brands have those three things, the backstory, the liquid, and the packaging. And I think Casamigos was very successful with that and also getting the timing right.
Well, barring a major sale to a major corporation of that spirit, how do celebrities make money here? I mean, I know it probably varies from spirit to spirit, but what are some of the ways that they can?
I mean, typically the celebrity will get involved in the brand in one of the early stages. They'll probably put some of their own money behind it. They'll get some friends behind it. They get some proper financial backing behind it. And the goal is to get the brand visible. And that's where the celebrity, really plays a role. Given their social media presence, given they're putting their name to the brand. Ultimately what you're trying to do though, and these brands are in the early stages, it's all about growth, it's all about distribution. But what you're trying to do ultimately is try and get the velocities up, try and get the proof of concept up. And when the brand hits maybe 50, 100,000 cases, that's when it starts to show up meaningfully with the large corporates. And that's when you can think about an exit. But, that won't be the end of it. I mean, typically they'll stay on board. These deals are structured in such a way that there's a initial upfront fee, and then there's an earn out at a later stage, providing they hit a number of metrics, which are usually top line driven. I mean, the bottom line will follow that. But ultimately, it's all about getting the top line, growth, going. And if we take, the example of Casamigos, I think when Diageo got hold of the brand, it was just 120,000 cases. So, it had critical mass, it had proof of concept, it had scale, but it wasn't so big that it couldn't grow exponentially through increased distribution and rate of sale. I think the brand peaked at nearly 3 million cases.
Wow.
So if you think about 30x, on the size of that brand, and they paid 10 times the sales of that brand, in retrospect, yes, that looked like a very big ticket acquisition, but it paid itself back and more in spades.
Right. Yeah. Well, so it can be pretty lucrative. But if I wake up tomorrow with 1 million Instagram followers and I find myself with 15 minutes of fame and I want to acquire or found a spirits brand, what is my plan of action? Is there a matchmaker that I need to get in touch with if I don't have any sort of spirits knowledge pre-existing? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, I think, if you, when you reach that fame, Jake, you'll almost certainly have an agent, right? And remember, it's not just, this won't just be the only thing you're looking at. Clearly, you'll be looking at a number of other products across maybe food, across cosmetics, across a number of, maybe some clothing, maybe some sneakers.
Yeah, who knows?
And people, yeah, exactly. And people will sort of come to you, right? And, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to get involved in a spirits brand by taking a stake in it or buying it out or even creating one. You could be an ambassador for a brand as well. So celebrities can be aligned with brands. David Beckham with Hey Club, they don't necessarily have to buy a stake in that brand, but when they buy stakes in the brand and they're sort of one of the founders of the brand, there's a bit more authenticity behind it. There's a bit more skin in the game. And when the brand is ultimately bought, which is I think the game here in terms of an exit, the fact that you will have a stake in your brand will give you more of a motivation to continue to push it beyond the initial down payment.
Writing this all down for my future agent. Are those kinds of Diageo style buyouts, at least at that scale, is that still what people are looking at as the dream outcome? Is that even a possibility at this point?
So, I mean, if you look at the deals that sort of, followed, the Diageo deal, I think in terms of the multiple that was paid, irrespective of whether, a brand has a celebrity behind it, if it's going to deliver that type of growth, you're looking at multiples of, between 5 and 10 times sales. So I think irrespective of, whether there's a celebrity behind it, if there's a brand that's in the right, right port of the cycle, has the right characteristics in terms of, packaging, liquid, backstory, that's really got that really strong momentum, you're going to get that type of multiple anyway, because the next owner of that brand will see the opportunity to scale up the brand initially within the US and then probably, internationally as well. So I think that is the goal. But look, having said that, if you're a celebrity with a brand that's not seeing those velocities, it doesn't have the potential, that's not sort of ticking every box that we've sort of talked to, then to get that type of multiple becomes much, much harder. Now, we have seen, a number of deals that followed Casamigos. I mean, we saw Aviation, which was another big, aviation gin, big ticket item, with a buyout. We saw obviously proper 12, the Irish whiskey with Conor McGregor behind it, another quite big ticket item. But, both those brands, at the time had, pretty good momentum and a decent runway ahead to see that type of, Casamigos-esque growth. Now, whether they succeed or not is another matter. But when you look at it from a perspective of one of the big multinationals, yes, it's a big ticket price, but in terms of the ability to move the dial, in terms of the ability to drive growth and influence group growth, which ultimately will then influence the share price, the risk reward is asymmetric if you get it right.
For brands that don't quite reach that level, what is the sort of median outcome there?
Well, for every brand that succeeds, I mean, there's a lot of brands that don't make it, of course, right? I mean, maybe they don't get the distribution, maybe they don't get the traction, maybe it's just not the right brand in the right place at the right time. And, they tend to slowly fizzle away. And what tends to happen is either the price starts to get promoted back, so you start to see quite heavy discounting, which can drive incremental volumes quite quickly. So if you see the price of a spirits brand being dropped by $10 or $15, guess what? People are going to buy it. But the type of message then you send to, your consumer base around the brand equity, how strong is the brand? Is it worth paying for? It starts to be undermined to some extent by that heavy promotional activity. So that's a bit of a slippery slope. What you sometimes see as well is that brands that are in the very early stages, if they're not additive, and if they're not creating a positive contribution to the broader celebrity's brand equity, because a lot of these celebrities will, have more than one finger in one pie. I mean, they'll have lots and lots of fingers and lots of pies. If they've got one that's a bit of a flop, you might see that brand sort of quietly, start to just wither away a little bit without much fanfare. So, it works both ways. Frankly, it's both in terms of, what the celebrity might bring to the brand, but also what the brand might detract from the celebrity in the event that it doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Is there consumer fatigue setting in? I mean, in your opinion, are drinkers still buying, or is this kind of fizzling?
So yeah, we need a bit more time for that rather than just a short podcast, I think, Jake. But if you look at sort of longer term themes, I mean, people have been drinking alcohol for 8,000 years, and I don't think it's going away at all. And what you're seeing is a bit of a correction, after a really good run over the last 25 years, and then 2 or 3 years where people sort of had a bit more disposable income, had much less to do, and probably drank a little bit more. So it's quite hard to disaggregate what is a bit of a hangover following the pandemic super cycle, where, growth basically was running at double the rate that it normally runs at, relative to some of the other challenges that are chipping away at beverage alcohol, whether it's just the affordability problem, 12 years of inflation in 2 years makes it very difficult for a big ticket discretionary item like alcohol. And look, this is not just impacting alcohol. This is impacting everything from, barbecue sauce to the chocolate, to broader consumer goods. You're seeing, that pressure come through at the moment. So there's an affordability question. Health and moderation has always been a question. It was there before the pandemic, and certainly, got a bit more pronounced since the pandemic. there's a broader question around recruitment of younger consumers, younger drinking age consumers, into alcohol. And then there's a broader question around to what extent is some of these brands advertising and promotional activity and marketing and innovation is not quite fit for purpose. And when you take a step back, I think what gives you confidence in this industry that there are pockets of growth. There is premiumization still going on. There are brands that are still absolutely crushing it, frankly. So I don't think this is enough to put fresh money off from coming into the sector, but the very, very easy get out of bed and grow 4 or 5% tailwind that existed in the 20 years running into the pandemic. That's not there right here, right now. There's still a correction going on, but I do think it's cyclical. I do think it will come back. So it does make it a little bit tougher, but what it does mean is if you're looking for a celebrity brand, you just have to look in the right places because there is growth out there. I mean, just look at the data shows brands that are doubling, still seeing really good growth and still seeing really good exits. If you're the right proposition, with the right pack, the right price point, the right liquid, the right backstory, you can still do very, very well. I mean, look at a brand such as Beatbox, just exited for $700 million. So there is growth. There still are opportunities out there.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great example. You mentioned health and wellness. Is that something that you're seeing more celebrities move into as far as, the NA sort of spirits, drinks angle? Is that the next frontier?
Yeah. So, I mean, zero alcohol, as a broader theme, if we take a more mature market like Europe, where people have been cutting back on alcohol for 60 years or so, zero alcohol beer is as much as 15%, 1/5 of overall beer in some of the developed markets of Spain and Germany. It's growing pretty quickly in the UK at the moment. I mean, it's still quite nascent, within the US. The category is going through a bit of a renaissance. I mean, very much led by the likes of Heineken Zero, Mich Ultra Zero, obviously Athletic, Guinness. And these are products that are quite aspirational. A lot of these products are consumed by people who both drink and don't drink, depending on sort of what time of the day it is, what day of the week it is, what they're doing. So there is a moderation theme, but I think what's interesting about zero alcohol beers is that the negative connotation that used to exist with zero alcohol, i.e. you probably drink them because you didn't have a great relationship with alcohol, that's completely gone away now. And I think people are drinking zeros complement their existing consumption. And we're even seeing it in Europe. I mean, I'm sure it's going to spread to the US, but people are mixing their own Guinness. So you can have a full fat Guinness at 4% ABV, or you can have a semi-skimmed at 2.5, or you can have a zero at 0. So people are making their own type of Guinness. And look, this broader mindfulness, this broader health and wellness agenda did exist before the pandemic, but it's suddenly picked up pace a little bit. So look, I think, clearly, you've got celebrities starting to go into zero, but ultimately you've got to have a great product. And what's interesting about zero is the type of beers that are being produced by the multinationals are very, very good because it's quite hard to make a good zero. Not like a craft beer where, if you, I'm not saying anyone can make a craft beer, but with a craft beer, if you just put a lot of hops into it, you can disguise the flavor. A zero is much, much harder to do that. So you've got to get your production, process absolutely spot on. And given it doesn't have ethanol in it, it's not quite as shelf stable as alcohol because alcohol is a preservative. Therefore, again, it just makes it a little bit harder to get the liquid absolutely spot on, when it comes to zero.
Yeah. Tom Holland has Perro. Lewis Hamilton, I think, has a spirit-free agave brand. So, I mean, people are moving into it. But have you ever personally purchased a bottle of alcohol because of the celebrity attached to it?
Well, there's a lot of choice, frankly, Jake, out there. But look, I have been given brands that have got sort of celebrities attached to them. So more in the beer space. So yeah, I've been given brands of celebrities that I like, just as sort of presence and for fun. But no, I haven't explicitly gone out and bought a brand because the celebrities pushing it. Now that's not to say I haven't gone out and bought a bottle of Casamigos because it's a very accessible. You know what you're going to get. You're not going to look, too embarrassed in front of your friends from buying a bottle of Casamigos because unlike the US, in the UK, there is still a bit of a connotation, towards tequila of something, you might have done at college with a lime and some salt and it gives you a horrible hangover. And, if you're trying to mix a margarita to someone who's got this negative perception of the category or trying to mix a Paloma, you want to go with something that you know is going to be good and safe and reliable. So I have bought a bottle of celebrity-backed tequila, but I haven't gone out of my way to buy it, because it's a celebrity's behind it.
Well, thank you so much. This has been really enlightening.
Good luck with your brand when you get your 1 million followers, Jake.
Thank you. I will probably be in touch at that point.
Please reach out.
How do you feel about celebrity spirits brands? Let us know at podcast@wineenthusiast.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to your favorite shows. You can also go to wineenthusiast.com/podcast for more episodes and transcripts. I'm Jake Abrams. Thanks for listening.